Life is full of moments. Those times when you have to make a choice and then everything changes. At the end of the road, there is no turning back. When it happens, everything starts to take off. For me, it was one of those nights that night. Being alone. For days, weeks, or perhaps years, that was all I could think about. Though I was 54 years old, I felt much older in my spirit. My marriage was completely devoid of passion and affection. Long ago, Albert ceased physically touching me. My husband, who is 65 years old, would spend his days dozing off on the living room couch and his nights either sleeping in his study or taking care of other matters. As I watched, he grew older. He wasn't the only one, though. Also, I was deteriorating. This house held me hostage. A sense of powerlessness was enveloping me as my rage intensified. Just to get people to notice me, I wanted to yell. However, Albert paid little attention. I was invisible to him. I decided to call Hector that night for that very reason. No relation to Albert. Age 27. In their youth. Exuding vitality. Not to mention the lone soul who gave me a serious stare. Perhaps no one had ever understood me like that before. My voice was trembling when he responded, but I refused to let go of my rage. Please, Hector, come and see to your uncle's needs. My time here is up. To be honest, I have no idea why I said that. Was it my true desire to depart? Alternately, was I merely patiently anticipating a halt? I had a feeling Albert wouldn't flinch. Hector nonetheless. His tone shifted. He got it. Why? Because I had confided in him about my feelings of isolation countless times before. I found Albert sound asleep on the couch when the door finally opened, which was hours later. His lack of interest just served to inflame my wrath. Hector nonetheless. Without a word, he entered my bedroom. As I secured my bag zipper, my hands quivered. My frustration, isolation, and disillusionment were weighing me down. But I felt the presence of an inner voice. Was it my true desire to depart? Or was I merely trying to get someone's attention by making a spectacular exit? When I turned around to see who was coming in, it was Hector. I had heard the door open. His expression betrayed a mix of worry and something else entirely. Diana, he replied in a low but determined voice. Avoid going. I understand that everything seems overwhelming at the moment, but we can find a way to overcome this. Even though I continued to close my suitcase while facing away from him, the edge to my voice had begun to soften. Get this done. Please, I whispered. Albert is completely unconcerned. Nothing will change regardless of my presence. A further step closer was taken by Hector as he sighed. Ignore such kind of thinking. You are aware of our recent behavior. We haven't merely been conversing, have we? I was momentarily paralyzed. Yeah, there was more to doing when he was around than simply conversing. Something more was going on behind the scenes. In any case, we had never gone beyond that boundary. I swung around slowly. I caught Hector's eye. Worry had transformed into something more in his eyes. It was clear to me. I was his desire. The place was usually livelier when Hector was there. At the age of 27, he was robust and youthful. His girth was ample, nostrils angular. However, his grin was inviting. He was ever composed when he spoke. On the other hand, his expression betrayed him. I hadn't felt anything in a long time until he came into my life. His opinion of me was self-evident. It made no difference that I was married to Albert. I could always hear that barely audible sigh he attempted to conceal as his gaze darted over me from head to toe. Yeah, I saw that too. Only because of him did I remember that I was still a desirable lady. Please help me out by subscribing to my channel and enabling notifications before this story becomes any more exciting for you. Thus, you will be able to access these stories even more swiftly. Your support in the form of a great like and remark would mean the world to me. I also wasn't denying it. It was clear to me that the woman I saw in the mirror was still there. I still looked stunning even though a lot of time had gone by. The color of my skin had not faded. Even now my figure is toned and firm. And no one had paid any attention to it but Hector. He attempted to obstruct my path. On the other hand, he wasn't. My decision not to go hit me like a ton of bricks. Something completely new was replacing my rage and isolation. Hector advanced toward me once more, his fingertips brushing across my palm as he did so. His voice was low and deep, almost echoic, as he warned Diana not to do this. Rest assured I am present. Leaving also means you aren't going to be acting on your true desires. My breathing became irregular. It slipped my mind entirely that I had the suitcase. I felt a strong aversion to departing. It wasn't Albert, though, that kept me here. I stand there still, frozen by the intensity of Hector's gaze. We were now much closer than before, and that was a scary thing. I felt a spark ignite within me at that same second. My life was about to take a dramatic turn tonight. But how and what? I too had no idea at the time. There was a change in the air. As time went on, Hector's presence began to fill the emptiness that had been my loneliness. It hit me, I really didn't want to go. Except Albert, he wasn't the one. I no longer desired any assistance from him. My ideas were changing and Hector saw it. He paused. I caught a fleeting glimpse of fear in his eyes. He felt he had gone too far. He began, "Listen, Diana." His voice slightly hurried. "The conversation with Albert will be mine. Perhaps we can find a solution." I abruptly ended our conversation. I assured Hector, "No," my voice now more subdued. His face contorted into a confused expression. "On the other hand, you did say." Reopening my suitcase's zipper, I inhaled deeply. It was partially open before, but now I was going to open it all the way. Hector paused, looking intently into my eyes. "Do you honestly believe I'm going to try to curry favor with Albert?" Then I spoke really angrily. "In all these years I haven't felt anything for this man. And you think I'm going to ask him for something? No, Hector. I'm done with that chapter." Hector looked down at the floor, his eyes averted. He was moved by what I had said. He nodded slowly. "Okay," he responded. "No way. What about Diana, though? You are and have always been an admirable woman. You're stunning and intelligent. The fact that no one has paid attention to you." I was curious as to his true intentions. However, I refrained from inquiring. I was already aware of that. I whispered to Albert. Saturday was his departure. In the next 2 days. In the meantime, pretend you're only passing through. Hector looked into my motivations for expressing this. "Why? Is that so?" he inquired. I moved closer to him, almost touching him by taking a few steps. Tonight, I didn't want him to think I was trying to hide my emotions. "Because I want to let you in before anything else," I stated. Our entire relationship shifted with that one sentence. Hector was entirely convincing in his role for those 2 days. He pretended as though his stay was brief. Unsurprisingly, Albert failed to notice a single thing. Where do I stand? Life moved at a snail's pace. Albert pretended everything was normal while Hector's simmering rage built inside him, and the talks were phony. It was all too much for me. I feel a tightening in my chest just thinking about it, due to the fact that those 2 days served no purpose whatsoever. However, it makes no difference. Saturday was the day that truly counted. Early in the morning, Albert began to gather his belongings. Until now, I had never witnessed him packing up so quickly. In the last several days, he has neglected to inform me that I am departing. He carried on with his life as usual, oblivious to my presence. Hector picked him up from the airport early in the morning. Silently, I expected him to return in the same manner. Though I was mistaken. Hector had returned by the time nightfall arrived. His entrance, nevertheless, made it clear that something was amiss. Whenever he laid eyes on me, his expression would typically be one of genuine warmth. But at this very moment, anger was now consuming them. His voice clenched as he spoke to Diana. Without even removing his coat, he marched directly toward me. Unimpressed, I settled into a couch chair. "What transpired?" I inquired. With a look of pure exasperation on his face, Hector shook his head. His tone betrayed his continued effort to comprehend the situation as he passionately agreed that you were right. "For what purpose?" I inquired despite being aware of the answer beforehand. Hector inhaled deeply and spoke rapidly. He mentioned that he will return on Monday morning. In order to go hunting with a long-lost friend, he is departing from the nation. Like in bygone days, they will spend time in the forest. It was predictable that Albert would be irresponsible. However, Hector saw it as the final straw. As I beheld him, I could see that he was clutching his fists. His anger toward his uncle was intense. Even as recently as a few days ago, I sensed that he retained some deference toward the man. But at this very moment, suddenly he resembled me. Albert no longer met his expectations. In an effort to control his fury, Hector exhaled sharply. I simply grinned. Simply, I told you. Since there was absolutely nothing else to clarify. Returning to the house that night, Hector was a transformed man. And we were both fully aware of the implications of it. As he shook his head and looked away from me, Hector inhaled deeply. Diana, your pain is too great for me to ease. My apologies. I've done my best and I've tried to sing Albert's praises, but my continued behavior would amount to a form of self-disrespect. Like a crushing burden, his words sank into my soul. However, discussing Albert and his actions was no longer something I was interested in doing. So I simply grinned softly and said, "Forget it, Hector," in a calm manner. "Please let's open a few of beers. All I want is a casual chat." For the moment, I would prefer not to even hear Albert's name. My mood improves whenever we talk. His wrath turned to understanding as Hector met my gaze. He nodded slightly and retrieved 2 beers from the refrigerator. I also rose slowly. However, as I got up, I allowed the tip of my skirt to droop slightly, barely enough to be barely perceptible. Almost instantly, I sensed a change in the atmosphere. Hector glanced down for an instant before swiftly averting his gaze. However, it slipped my mind. Like a gentle breeze, the tension between us wafted over the room. As he presented me with one of the icy beverages, I delicately ran my fingers over his. Almost imperceptible, a delicate touch. However, that alone sufficed. The entire night would be altered by that one spark. Please, I desired this. Hector seemed to be developing an interest in it as well. My lips were cooled by the beer's coolness, but a new type of fire was building inside. I had repressed my emotions for a long time, refusing to let myself be vulnerable. But at this very moment, no longer did it bother me. I felt much more at ease after speaking with Hector. We were both frustrated with Albert at first, but as the chat progressed, we started talking about more lighthearted things. Recollections of bygone days, amusing anecdotes, and ludicrous tales we shared. And before we knew it, we were both a little tipsy. We couldn't stop giggling. The last time I laughed so hard is beyond my memory. The frustration, the isolation, the letdown. While I was in Hector's company, it vanished. After a while, we gathered on the couch after setting our empty beer bottles on the table. I sat closer to Hector than usual due to the warmth inside me and the wonderful buzz in my head. It was dangerously near. Perhaps even dangerously near. Nevertheless, it was irrelevant to me. Still grinning, Hector shifted his attention to me. Now though, something different was staring back at him. There is a tug, a knot that is about to burst. Along with her, he sensed it. Both of us did. Together, we locked gazes as I twirled the bottle. Because of the minor vertigo I was experiencing, I wanted to express my own feelings without reservation. Hector, I smiled and leaned in a bit more when I said this. Your company is much missed. Plus, I recently had the epiphany that you bring joy to my life. A small swallow escaped Hector's lips, but his smile remained unabashed. He spoke softly, his voice heavy, about how you lift his spirits as well, Diana. He was attempting to contain something. To be clear, I wasn't attempting to be subtle. So I posed the question that would change everything, fearlessly and with all my courage. Hector, do you have a significant other? Hector's grin softened slightly, as if he understood my point perfectly. Can you explain? He inquired, slightly arching an eyebrow. I drew nearer, drawing in even closer to his side. He was now also aware of the strain. I set my drink down on the table and turned to face him, explaining what I meant. Hector, are you also lonely? For a moment there was complete quiet. Without saying a word, he averted his gaze and nodded slightly. Inside I felt a flutter. I had taken over at this point. Waiting wasn't going to happen to me this time. So I said softly while tilting my head slightly. Does your life lack a woman? Does no one desire you? As Hector gulped, his fingers quivered ever so slightly as they brushed against the glass. Their slickness is caused by condensation. He preferred to avoid discussing this matter. On the other hand, he found it appealing. There was absolutely nowhere to hide tonight. Hector placed his beer bottle on the table, inhaling deeply while he averted his eyes from mine. A confession he had been suppressing hung heavy in his voice. "Diana, I have been spending a lot of time alone." Upon saying my name, his voice grew huskier, and I felt a knot in my stomach. In all candor, being in your company is the only way I know how to feel good. I felt a surge of emotion when I read that, similar to an unspoken truth that had been lingering for what felt like an eternity. His countenance was scrutinized by me. His gaze conveyed a message. He shared my sentiments. As a gentle smile crept onto my lips, I delicately ran my fingertips around my glass. I could no longer conceal the truth that had been developing within me. "Hector," I said with great care, "it's only fair that we both enjoy a nice mood." "Possibly, yes. We are precisely supposed to be here." He clenched his jaw. On his knees, his hands briefly clenched into fists before he released them. I felt my breath catch because of how intently he was observing me. After much internal struggle, he finally let it all out. He had been bottling this up for far too long, for although his voice was powerful and unruffled, it quivered slightly. He murmured to Diana, "Do you not realize this? My feelings for you are too obvious to conceal. For the same reason that you aren't running." A halt was imposed on all activities. I understood his meaning perfectly. I had no intention of sprinting. It was impossible for me to do. Hector shrugged and got to his feet. As his gaze met mine, he brought his hands to my face, caressing my cheek with his thumbs. Suddenly his mouth met mine. Everything he had been suppressing for months, if not years, erupting in a torrent during the kiss. Ignored attraction, repressed longing, and wordless emotions. It all came crashing loose all at once. A tiny part of me attempted to wonder how we had arrived at this point, but by then it was too late. I was utterly enchanted by this passionate moment, and all I could feel was Hector's warmth and firm touch. As I returned his kiss, my hand slid to his neck, intertwining my fingers in his hair. Please, I desired this. In Hector's embrace, I yearned to dissolve. There was absolutely no room for doubt in my mind when I rose to my feet. I had no plans to quench the inferno that had grown out of control. I whispered, my voice quivering slightly, that we both deserve better. My fingers fumbled with the dress straps as I put down my beer. Taking my time, I lowered them over my shoulders. The fabric cascaded down my legs and dipped to my feet with ease. With his breath irregular, Hector fixed his gaze on mine. I understood his thoughts precisely without him saying a word. I lowered myself to a kneeling position, put my hands on his shoulders, and pushed him back into the couch with care. For an entire second he stared straight at me. His resistance was non-existent. He seemed to have been anticipating this moment for quite some time. Feelings of intense fire inside me are beyond my ability to put into words. I felt really empowered and free for the first time in my life. I was unable to open my eyes during that first breathtaking moment. Hector could be in for the same thing, in my opinion. Because I had been ignored for so long, it didn't take much for me to fully release. Just as Hector had. Our redness and shortness of breath intensified as the minutes ticked by. Even without praising me, Hector seemed engrossed in the occasion. Obviously, that was going to be the case this time around. Though it didn't take long at all, this was the initial one. Once again, my legs tensing and quivering, I released myself. At this point, I was firmly grasping my thighs while my nails scraped on my flesh. It was thrilling all the same, like if I had resuscitated. In contrast, Hector acted like a little boy. After I drew nearer and spoke some words to him, he seemed to finally let go, and he collapsed next to me as if drunk. We couldn't help but giggle as we exchanged glances, expressing our immense joy. Nothing else mattered to us save the fact that we would be spending the next 2 days together. A new era was dawning. The moment it was light outside, I looked around for Hector and eventually found him in the kitchen. In a flash, I was at his side. This was just the beginning of what was to come. The next story I tell you will have even more lovely things to say. If you enjoyed this and would want to see more videos like this, please subscribe to my channel and hit the like button. To ensure that you receive stories like these even faster, turn on notifications and give a super like. There is so much more I want to tell you.